Hello everyone. Thank you for joining Experimental Civics and our Design Thinking for Social Good series. This is Module 4, First Glance, and is one of the 6 design thinking tools that we will be sharing with you. From the name of this activity, you might have guessed, it's all about observations. The importance of observations. So, you have an impactful idea that you think will make a difference, and you're all geared up to launch your product and platform. But then, you host a design thinking activity, and you realize that you actually have no idea how the end user is using your product. You also don't know their true pain points. What happened? What were you missing? The core of design thinking is the human-centered approach. So let's focus on applying it when we are designing services, systems, or products. Simply put, we have people at the forefront of everything we do. In order for us as design thinkers to do that, we have to assess our observations and keep our assumptions in check. Let's begin with definitions. What is the difference between observation and assumption? Observation is the action or process of observing something or someone carefully in order to gain information. An assumption is something that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof. Now, we have all led with our assumptions at the forefront at one time or another. It happens so easily. It's a little scary. So, let's keep those in check. Here's how. Use the ladder of inference to build observations. There is a wonderful tool called the ladder of inference. Credit goes to the systemsthinker.com for an awesome layout of the ladder of inference. Basically, as with most ladders, there are rungs. The ladder of inference has a total of 7 rungs to be mindful of, and you will begin your journey at the first rung, which is also the bottommost rung. The first rung is available data. This represents your truest observations. The second rung is select data. This is where we unconsciously start to select aspects of our surroundings and experiences to pay closer attention to. The third rung is paraphrasing the data, and is where we start to interpret what is happening. We also look for all the indirect clues to what is happening in the situation. Body language is an example of the third rung. The fourth rung is name what is happening, and is where you are now building categories. The fifth rung is explain or evaluate what is happening, and is when you are now processing the why. The sixth rung is decide what to do, and you are now at the point where you need to take action. The seventh rung is the reflexive loop, which is where you have already decided to take action, and that action is based on your paraphrasing, interpretation, and assumption. Do you see what happened here? Your action at the end, or this last rung, is usually not based on just the available data, which was the first rung. Okay. Here's a bit of trivia. Did you know that our brains are wired to only act on available data? It's true. It's a biological mechanism that can be very useful for survival in most scenarios. But when we're designing, it isn't ideal. Instead, be aware of this wiring, while purposefully pivoting from instincts towards expansive ways of thinking about things. Practice this dynamic in your next interaction with someone. Perhaps it's a seemingly negative one. What did you assume? How did you act? Were you able to rationalize a different action? How did it feel to check yourself on your bias? Speaking of bias, understanding team bias. While you can be doing all of the self-work necessary to evaluate your design thinking mindset, you still operate in a team. So let's apply this dynamic to the next activity. Gather your team together. Everybody agrees on one topic to discuss, and it can be a simple one, like about a recent meal. Then Divide the team into pairs, if possible. These pairs will rotate after 3 minutes. One team member will talk about a recent meal, so breakfast or lunch or dinner for 1 minute, while the other team member practices active listening. During the second minute, the active listening team member will then share their assumptions. During the third minute, the pair will talk about the observations and assumptions made. Here's an example. Mike shares how he had his vegan acai bowl with a green smoothie. It is very stressful for him since he had to commute pretty far to get to work, but he has been on this regimen for the past few months and he feels better than ever. Karen actively listens for a minute and then shares her assumptions. She feels that Mike is very adamant about his healthy eating, but she wouldn't personally go through all that trouble herself. She would just purchase something on the way to work, or forget about the whole smoothie ordeal altogether. Since Mike is pretty fit physically, she also wondered if he was more vain than she realized. In the final minute, Mike explains how, due to his physical health condition, he has to maintain this regimen according to his doctor's recommendation. He cares about having a long, healthy life. He shares that he has 2 young children at home as well. Karen realizes that her assumptions and also projection of her preferences and habits onto Mike happened so quickly, she had no idea. She is now more self-aware. Now, Karen and Mike will trade places in this activity and learn more about each other and themselves, especially in the context of thinking. We make these judgment calls all day and every day. As design thinkers, we need to be even more mindful to call out these moments, especially when our product is catering to millions of people. The gift of active listening. For the understanding team bias activity to be impactful, everyone needs to engage in active listening. Active listening is a huge part of design thinking. Everyone also needs to approach the activity from a space of trust, respect, and understanding. Active listening is designed to encourage creating this environment. You are gaining information and perspective from the person you are listening to, with intention. You can practice active listening by first being attentive and engaging. You dismiss or minimize what is happening around you or thinking about your next steps, and instead, focus on the speaking person's words, expressions, and body language. Then repeat and paraphrase what they have just shared with you. Ask open-ended questions about what they just said. Is there something that can be expanded upon? What did you learn about them? Build empathy. Did you feel how they probably feel? Active listening is a valuable, yet at times challenging skill. Some days are better than others. Don't worry if some days are tricky or you struggle. Mindfulness makes it better. Identifying personas. As the team rotates, and as you complete this activity, everyone begins to realize the assumptions that they have, but more importantly, what their original observations were to begin with. That's the key with this activity. At the end, point out to everyone that we only talked about a meal. But it's also significant to understand the deeper connection that everyone had to their choices. Likewise, we can observe consumer behavior, but we need to understand why it is the way that it is. Resulting from this activity, we step into identifying end-user personas. What is a persona? A persona is the aspect of someone's character that is presented to or perceived by others. Focus on who these people are and the core of what you know and what you don't know about them and their lives. Start your project here. You may realize that you need to scale back and do more research than you thought before. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. See you in the other modules.